everybody. Thanks for being so patient. I'm Amy from Mentor Library, and tonight with us is Carol Powers and Pat Smeby from the Master Gardener Volunteers with Lake County. And so they are going to talk to us about what we can do to continue gardening as we age. Take it away, ladies.
Well, what we were going to talk about tonight, of course, is gardening as you age. And as you look at us, both of us, you realize that we have a lot of experience. Okay. Pat and I are both master gardeners with the Lake County Master Gardener Program. I just want to kind of fill you in on what that is. It is part of the Ohio State University Extension Program. And we are one of many things that the Extension Program does, but our goal is we were trained by OSU educators, and then we help them by going out into the community and sharing information. The information that we're going to be talking about is basically, gardening as you age, broken the program down into three parts, actually. The first part was just talking about some of the things that we can do preparing to go out and work into the garden and some safety tips and things like that. Then Pat was going to talk about some of her equipment that she has gathered over the years and share some thoughts with us about that. And then I was going to go back and talk about what we can do in the garden, perhaps, to help us make things a little bit easier for ourselves. I wanted to start out first, just kind of remembering what we we like about gardening, and some different ideas, of course. Well, personally, I enjoy gardening because I find it very relaxing. I enjoy being out in nature. And if I work at the end of the day and I've accomplished something, I do feel that sense of accomplishment. And it is good exercise. And I'm sure everybody has different reasons what they enjoy about gardening. But we all know that as we age, I'm not sure about everyone in the audience, but as we age, we do have some more challenges. We find our muscles are weaker, we ache more readily, we realize that falls are more dangerous, so we have to be extra careful not to fall. And our endurance and energy just isn't what it used to be. I know I used to be able to go out and garden for 6-7 hours a day, maybe taking a break at lunchtime, but that doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, there's lots of things that can affect us as we age. But we still have to remember that gardening is still considered by the most popular leisure activity for seniors. And it does keep our minds active, and it does keep us physically active too. But we have to remember we've got to take care of ourselves. So some of the things that approaches that I like to use is try to just decide, okay, I go out in the yard and I'm going to try to accomplish maybe 1 or 2 things. In the springtime when you go out and you're looking at your garden and you're just overwhelmed, I got to clean up the flower beds, I got to get the grass ready, I got to do this, I got to do that. That can be a bit overwhelming. So I think if you just start each day that you are able to go out in the garden, to just kind of set some priorities and don't, take it off, as they say, take it off in bite-sized pieces. Like, okay, I'm going to plant these 2 new plants that I have, or I'm going to clean up that flower bed, or whatever, depending upon the time of the year. You need to consider any medications and things like that might affect you as you're gardening or outside. Maybe you have a sensitivity to sun that you didn't used to have. So you have to make sure that you prepare to be out in the sun. It's important to make sure you're drinking plenty of water, and also take a break when you get tired. I think Pat said one day, she likes to have a lawn chair out by where she's working. And so When she gets tired, she goes over and sits down and rests for a few minutes. Try to avoid doing repetitive tasks for a long time. Now, of course, if you're pruning, you're going to keep using your hand clippers or your loppers or whatever. But again, if your arms or hands really start aching, stop and proceed. Take a little bit of rest. Now, it's also very important that we have good foot protection. Remember, the grass can be slippery out in the out in the morning if there's a heavy dew or it's recently rained. So you want to make sure you're using good sturdy shoes. You want to protect your skin. You perhaps need to wear long sleeve shirts to protect yourself. You want to have a hat. I find that wearing a hat always makes me feel cooler. And an important thing to do is to limber up before you start gardening. Fact sheet that's got some very interesting exercises that you can go through. Maybe you go out for just a little walk, 5 or 10 minute walk. You're at least moving your legs and everything. You're helping with your blood circulation. Maybe you do yoga and you have some yoga stretches, or maybe you've worked with a physical therapist who've given you some stretches that will help you. We must make sure as I mentioned, we would have to make sure that we position ourselves to avoid slips, trips, and falls. And that includes, where did you lay down your rake? Where is your garden hose out nearby? Just making sure that you are aware of what's around and things like that. If you're using power tools, you probably want to wear some ear protection. Unfortunately, a lot of times my neighbors are mowing their lawn and I really need ear protection from the sound of their lawnmower. It's important to label everything that you are gardening with, particularly chemicals, fertilizers and things like that. It's hard sometimes to read the labels on things, but you can put a label on, strip of tape or something on that says, this is a insecticide or this is a fertilizer or whatever, just to make sure that you're aware of what all the things that you're dealing with. Use whatever protective equipment that you have. You have a back brace that helps when you're out trying to lift. You have perhaps knee braces if you're troubled with your knees. Knee pads, whatever, to help in any way. Use that equipment that you might have. Now, certainly if you are working with any chemicals, you need to be aware of any of what they are, and if necessary, use masks and goggles. Protecting your back, and I wanted to talk about lifting and how the proper way of lifting is. We also need to think about if we're moving things around, don't overload or try to carry everything out at once. It's better to make 2 or 3 trips to get all your equipment and materials that you're working than trying to overload things. And I know that's something that I'm bad at. You have to really stop and think. We don't want to try to avoid carrying things and big, heavy things any distance or awkward things. That's what carts and we'll talk a little bit more about carts and wheelbarrows in a little bit. And as I mentioned, make sure you use your back brace. Now, when you actually start to lift something, and you've probably heard this before, but it's just worth repeating, it's important that you use your legs to lift with rather than your back muscle. And that means that if you've got something that you need to lift, whether it's the handles of a wheelbarrow or if it's a box of something or a bag of mulch or whatever, you want to have your feet firmly planted a little ways apart. You want to bend your knees, bend at the knees, And so when you actually get ready to lift, you are pushing up with your legs. You want to make sure your toes and your head are pointed in the same direction. In other words, you have your toes pointed. Make sure you're looking straight ahead, not down at your toes, but you're looking straight ahead. That's just going to naturally help you keep your back in a natural position, a neutral position. Take a deep breath, and inhale, engage your stomach muscles, and exhale as you lift. Those are all things that you learn if you're doing yoga or Pilates or anything like that. And hold whatever you're trying to lift close to you. In other words, don't have your arms extended trying to lift. Make sure you're close to what it is. And sit whatever you're lifting, sit it down, move your body a little bit and turn your whole body and then put it down. You don't want to lift and twist at the same time if you can avoid it at all possible, because that's where you really can stress your back. We can talk a little bit about what I call hauling devices. That's, wheelbarrows, carts, various things like that. Avoid the old-fashioned single wheelbarrow. I know though they are so hard to move and balance at the same time, particularly if you have the old hard rubber narrow wheels. It's much better to have 2 or more wheels on your cart or your wheelbarrow. They're so much more stable. You don't have to try to balance things as you're trying to push them. Consider how much weight you're putting into whatever it is that you have, a wheelbarrow or a cart. You don't want to have a cart or a wheelbarrow that weighs 90 pounds before it has anything in it or something like that. If you have a cart, it's usually a good idea to have one that has you can remove the front and the back of it in some way, so you can perhaps stack bigger things in it, and make sure it has larger tires. Certainly, when you're using carts and wheelbarrows, particularly with wheelbarrows, make sure you're following all those rules about proper lifting and not putting a lot of pressure on your back. As you're looking at your hands and considering protecting your hands, if you hold your arms straight down and just relax your hand, you will see that there's kind of a natural curve at your wrist. So if possible, always work with your hand in that position. And if you straighten out your hand like so, it's a straight line from your arm to the top of your hand by your thumb. That's putting stress on those muscles and joint there. So, try to keep things neutral, like your back is in a neutral position, your hands are in a neutral position. It's good to have gloves that can help you grip things. And if you're using hand tools, it's important to have hand tools that have a spring action or a ratchet action. If you're to protect your elbows and your shoulders, we want to try to avoid twisting and reaching. If we're lifting something, we have to have our hands up above our heads because we're reaching up for something and everything. Don't try to twist at the same time, because that's where you can really hurt yourself. And you want to minimize the amount of work that you do where you do have to have your hands above your head. Of course, if you're pruning or something like that, that you may have to do that. But try to limit the amount of lifting, reaching, and pulling that you do. It also is helpful to use long-handled, maybe you have long-handled tools. I think of a watering wand. It's basically a head that's on a longer tube. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but that is very useful because it allows you to actually direct the water where you need it, whether it be down towards the roots of a plant, or maybe it's a hanging basket or something up above. But again, it helps you avoid maybe reaching over your head or reaching back into a flower bed or something like that. And again, stretching is important throughout the day.
All right. First off, let me start off by saying that I'm nudging 90 very hard. And by that, I have the usual aches and pains that go along with aging. I have arthritis in my joints, all of them, and it's not the fancy kind. It's the plain old generic kind, osteoarthritis. I replaced both my hips back in my 70s, and I had a total knee replacement just a couple of years back. My kids joke that I'm going to be the bionic woman if this keeps up. But let's begin with the hands. I have arthritis in my hands, so they're weak. They tend to swell up and hurt from overuse. And there's some really nice garden tools to assist with weak hands. I'm not endorsing any particular products, but I'm just giving you an idea of what might work for you if you have similar problems. Tools with spring action or ratchets seem to help. Here are some of those things that I feel help me. I have a picture of Felco bypass pruning shears number 6 for small hands. My reach is barely 6 inches from the tip of my thumb to the tip of my little finger. And these bypass Felco shears have a spring action. They seem to stay sharp. They have bright red handles, so if I put them down, I can find them. So I like them a lot. The company Fiskars makes a lot of similar cutters, but I'm not sure they have any that are particularly for smaller hands, women's hands. Fiskars makes a Ratchet pruner, which makes it easy to cut thicker dead branches. And they advertise that it will cut 1-inch diameter dead branches. I bought it to cut rose branches. Now, Anvil Pruners will smash the stem if you're just cutting on live products, but are on live greenery. But if you're cutting dead rose, it won't make any difference. The only problem with the Fiskars ones is that to get a 1-inch branch in the jaws of the cutting mechanism, why the handle's open to 8 inches and I can't stretch that far to make it work. They cut nicely, they're real slick, and they're great for cutting dead branches, but you can't cut a 1-inch branch. I have loppers that have a ratchet that allow me to cut heavier branches in the bushes, and they have longer handles, like a 22-inch handle, so I can reach further back into the bush to make my cuts. And there are grass shears that have a spring action, which makes it easier to cut grass near flower beds. You don't injure the flowers. If I try it with a string trimmer, I'm liable to cut the heads off the flowers. I have a very fine wheelbarrow that I used to be able to keep balanced and move soil or mulch around the yard. I can't do that anymore, so I retired the wheelbarrow, and in its place, I bought a garden wagon. The one I bought is a metal thing. You can take the sides off, all 4 sides come off so it can be flat. I can load it with all kinds of tools, bags of fertilizer, bird seed. I can even overload it and make it difficult to pull around in the yard. But for the most part, it's really quite a workhorse for me. I can even put my little portable garden bench across this on top of all the other stuff, and it will ride where I want to go to weed. The bench that I bought is about the same height as a lawn chair. There's some cute little scooters that you can buy and scoot around the garden beds, and they have an opening you can store your tools in. But if my seat is way below my knees, I can't get back up on my feet again. The little benches have a padded seat. They don't weigh much, and they're cheap. They run around $15. You can even turn them so you can kneel on them or stand on them. I can't kneel because of the knee. admit that I was on an incline, and I found I quickly fell over backwards. Didn't hurt me or anything because I was on the grass, but I still was surprised how fast I went over. There's a blue canvas cover that you can get that holds your tools for you, and it fits into a 5-gallon bucket. It keeps the tools easily so I can access them. I can put it in the wagon and be prepared for whatever task is at hand. I have a little garden trowel, which is a bright yellow handle and a tooth edge on one side. So I can easily remove dirt from, say, a grass plug that I want to transfer, but it has too much dirt on it, just knocks it right off. I also have a hand weeder with an ergonomic handle. It's a short one, but they have bright yellow on them, so you can find them in the grass when you lay them down. The best weeder, though, that I have, the one I like the best, has a 4-foot handle. I can stand up and reach further back in the bed to remove a weed. I don't have to bend over or anything. My husband had a gas-powered string trimmer, but it was too heavy and awkward for me to use, so I bought one of the newer battery-powered string trimmers. It's lightweight, and the charge lasts for about an hour, which is about what it takes me to finish off all my trimming after I've mowed. My problem with it is that to reach around the battery to remove it from the charger or from the equipment is longer, the reach is longer than my hand will make. So you better check that out. I didn't even think about it when I bought it, and I have a terrible time with it, trying to get it in and out of the charger or in and out of the machine. Once that's done, the thing is a breeze. But I was in Home Depot or Walmart, I don't remember which, and I found a 6-inch bar clamp that I can put around it, squeeze the bar clamp down onto the part you have to depress, and use the bar clamp as a handle to remove the thing from the charger or from the machine. Now you can turn the head on this thing and edge your driveway or your cement, but I can't do that. So I have found that I had an old electric edger, and I use it to run an edge down the driveway. It's easier to run. You just stand up and run behind, but you have to have an electric cord to run it. If you want, though, I have even tried using the trimmer without turning it like they tell you, but just using it and tilting it, and it will cut a nice edge on the driveway too. So, and then I don't have to mess with wet soil or anything. There's some handy rakes out there. I bought a narrow one. It's only about 6 inches, but it's got a 48-inch handle. And I can reach under flower beds with it and rake the leaves out from underneath the roses or whatever. There's another metal rake that I bought that has the advantage that you can open it wide to make like a leaf rake, or you can pull it up tight and make it like the little rake that I use underneath the bushes. My husband bought a John Deere riding mower. It's the smallest one they made. It's a 125. And the problem with it was that in Ashtabula, where we were living at the time, it was heavy and it would get stuck on the grass. The wheels would spin. It wouldn't dig a hole or anything, but the wheels would spin. He'd get stuck and frustrated, and I have to go out with the gator and pull him out, get him started again. So with the frustration of that, fooling around all the time with him, I went out and bought an electric start mower, which I can walk behind, but I'm getting to the point where I'm not stable on ground, so I ride the John Deere now. But the electric mower was slick. You have a push button, starts right up. You have to charge it, of course. It doesn't take too long to charge it. It pulls itself, so it's really not difficult to operate. It's just that I can't walk behind it like I used to be able to. The John Deere now I'm stuck with. it has a manual that has all these caveats. If you do this, it won't run. If you do that, it won't run. And it's just terrible. You can't hardly understand the manual. They don't really tell you what you can do to just make it turn on and run. With the electric one, there is a string you can pull. I just don't have the strength of my shoulders to pull it and start it. Raised beds are a great idea, and they're easy to set up with the prepared kits you can buy, but you need soil to get them going. Moving soil can be difficult, even though you can buy bags of it nicely packaged up in the garden shops. Container gardening is great. I have 3 earth boxes, and I usually grow tomatoes in them or peppers. They work fine, but staking tomatoes in them is a problem. There's not enough soil to really hold a good stake for them. They're nothing more, though, than a plastic bucket, basket, whatever you want, a container, with a tube in it to drain it. They have a divider at the bottom. You can fill one end with water, and it'll keep the soil damp from beneath. Again, though, you need to transport soil and whatever. So I went out and I bought a $20 collapsible dolly to move bags of mulch or soil or whatever you want. If I can get the bag out of the car and drop it on the dolly, I'm in good shape. I can move it anywhere. I limit my plant sizes to a quart. I don't buy any plant bigger than in a quart pot. I only use a small shovel. You want to use common sense, and you don't want to work through pain. It isn't worth it. If you begin to ache, it's time to quit. Also, if you have any braces to assist you, use them. If you have carpal tunnel and you have the splint, which I did for a while, you can wear it. Weeding is a repetitive movement, so the splint will help take the strain off the wrist. I was given a leg brace a few years back, and I'm going to work, if I'm going to work in the yard, I put on the leg brace. It keeps me stable on uneven ground. Better than falling down and trying to call 911. I use my cane as well. All of it seems cumbersome, but it works for me. I also carry my smartphone in case I do fall, and I bought the smartwatch so I can call 911 if it's an emergency. I thought I would use the watch better than the necklace type emergency control. Finally, I have no idea what this last little tool is. It's got a wide end on the blade that is just the width of a brick, a common brick, and it's got a pointed end on the other end of the blade, and it's got a 2-foot handle. And the funny thing about it was I was visiting my son in Texas, and he gave it to me for a Christmas gift. And I was flying home on Southwest, and I didn't have a big suitcase. I had traveled with a very light overnight bag practically. And so getting on the plane, I thought, oh, they'll say something. I couldn't get it in the suitcase, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I left the ribbon on it and got on the plane. And obviously this was years ago. TSA wasn't there. Nobody bothered me. I got on the plane and put it in the overhead bin, and it worked out fine. I got it home. I don't know. Nowadays, you couldn't do that.
Well, thanks, Pat, for some of the ideas that she has developed over the years. I think I do have one comment about the seat that she's talking about. It's kind of a up on legs if it's a seat, and then you can flip it over and kneel on it. The thing I like about it is those legs act as a railing that you can actually push yourself up off of if you can still kneel. But I use that all the time because getting up off the ground is not a pretty sight to behold. So the rest of the presentation is more about what you can do to the garden to help you minimize your efforts. So and it does involve a bunch of pictures of plants and things like that, but I'll just go through some of the ideas that that we were discussing. Obviously, many times get older, maybe our gardens are just too big to manage. You just got a lot more garden than you really need, whether it be a vegetable garden or a flower garden, a shade garden, or whatever. So perhaps one of the things you can do, obviously you could, dig out all the plants, give them to your friends or whatever, and plant it in grass, or maybe you want to put in some low growing ground covers that will still add some interest, but they're very, that you don't really have to do very much to them. And then we can look at different plant materials that are lower maintenance. I'm certainly not going to tell you there's anything that doesn't take any maintenance. I think we all know that by now. So some of the things I like to use are ground covers, and there's lots of different ones that you can use. I have a lot of epimedium, which is a low-growing plant, grows about 8 to 10 inches tall. It has a bloom in the spring before it puts out its leaves that, quite frankly, I don't think is very pretty, but the leaves, there's all kinds of different variegated leaves that you can buy in the epimedium. It does spread, but it's not real aggressive. I like to use hellebores. They are a plant that just adds so much interest throughout the year. They're a plant that's Lenten rose or Christmas rose is another different name for them. But they put up their flower heads very, very early. Fact is, a lot of times when you push the snow melts, you'll already see some flower heads that are coming up. The flowers come up and they last for a long time, particularly if it's chilly. We don't have the real hot weather in this early spring. Then the leaves come out and they're actually quite attractive, and so they last all year, or for a lot of the season. The flowers themselves come in a number of different colors, and there's a lot of different varieties that you can get, but a lot of them will kind of age to either a mauve or a chartreuse green or something. So they really do add a lot of interest. Some of the other things that you can have or use are, there's some geraniums, hardy geraniums that act as kind of, they spread a bit, but they have a little bit of a bloom in the spring, which is always attractive. And then they have a very interesting leaf structure that adds a lot of interest to your garden throughout the season. You can always use bulbs, to get color into your garden. Whether, the spring bulbs that you would be planting now, or there's lilies, there's irises. They're not exactly a bulb, but they're kind of in that, there's something that keeps coming back every year. Irises may need to be lifted occasionally and split if the irises stop blooming. It just means that the roots are so crowded that they're not getting enough moisture to cause it to bloom. There's a lower maintenance perennials that you can use. I'll just read you kind of a list of things that I would have talked about and shown pictures of. There's all kinds of different sedums that keep coming back year after year. There's some that bloom earlier in the year. There's some that bloom in the midst of the summer. And of course, now you probably, if you're lucky enough to have sedums in your garden, you're seeing the pinks and the reds and everything. And they last for quite a while too. Coreopsis is another plant that's quite hardy. I particularly like the threadleaf Coreopsis moonbeam because it's got a very fern-like leaf to it, or a very fine leaf to it, and it blooms for quite a while in early summer. Black-eyed Susans are pretty maintenance-free. They keep coming back. They sort of self-seed and expand, things like that. There's several different kinds of black-eyed Susans, varieties, purple coneflowers. Coneflowers, they've done so much hybridizing for the coneflowers. Now, some of the newer hybrids aren't as hardy or don't last as long or bloom as well as the plain old purple one that is native. I mentioned hardy geraniums. There's catmint, another nice shrub. It blooms in the early or late spring, early summer, and it has a purple bloom on it. This past year it was really quite stunning for almost a month. Of course, hostas are another thing that keeps coming back year after year. We all know if you have hostas and if you happen to have deer in your vicinity, you're just putting out a salad for them. So if you really want to have hostas, you usually have to use some sort of deer deterrent. There's all kinds of neat grasses. Now, we don't recommend putting in miscanthus. Those are the great big grasses that get 6 feet, even bigger, and everything. Those tend to they spread out. But they get so large and they are difficult to handle. But there's lots of different smaller grasses. There's drop seeds. There's the drop seed and the small fountain grasses. And they just have a nice texture, can give you some contrast within your garden. And many of them have nice seed heads. They're on at this time of the year. Some of them, there's a red rocket that's very attractive that has kind of a reddish seed head. The drop seeds now have their seed heads up and everything. But many of the grasses, are between 18 inches and 2 feet. So, stay small and just make a nice mound within the garden. Some other ideas. You can replace your annuals and perennials with flowering shrubs. There's some suggestions. There's shrub roses. It can be very lovely. They are not nearly as much trouble to maintain as the hybrid teas. You don't have to keep spraying and doing this and fussing about them all year. They just kind of do their thing. You may have to deadhead them a little bit if you want them to keep blooming nicely. There's spireas. There's all kinds of different spireas, different sizes. Some of them stay reasonably small. They tend to bloom very early summer. You've got different colors of the leaves themselves. You've got different colors, the pinks and the whites, and that tend to be in that general range. Hibiscus are another thing that you might want to consider. They come in various sizes and earlier and still blooming at this point. You may have the big dinner plate type of hibiscus. There's some that are about 6 inches. Each bloom is about 6 inches wide, whereas I think some go up to even 10 inches perhaps. Very striking, very showy. The hibiscus that tends to be blooming right now is lots of purples and whites and stuff like that. But again, you can select different shrubs that are blooming throughout the year to add color to your garden. And of course, you can also use small trees. And there's things like red buds. There's the red leaf maple, cut leaf maples. There's all kinds of the smaller trees. The Coosa dogwood is very impressive. Now they can get pretty big, but it's a small tree compared to say at your maples and your used to be ash, oaks, and things like that. So just a couple more things that you want to consider. Use good watering techniques, which means you water things well and deep, not you don't go out and water just cursory, a little bit every day. It's much better to water for a longer period of time so the roots will grow deeper. You want to water in the early morning if possible. That's the best time to water. You don't want to be watering in the heat of the day. It can actually damage the plants or put stresses on the plants. You lose so much to evaporation and things like that. So, you just have to use some common sense, but watering earlier in the morning is the best because then the plants dry off and they aren't, if you water in the evening, there's a possibility they'll stay damp all night and that can cause some issues and diseases potentially. I didn't mention, one of the things that I like to use, particularly with my watering, is the collapsible hoses, the pocket, there's different varieties, they call them different ways. But anyway, they're so much more lightweight. I know you can't use a sprinkler with them, but I certainly don't mind carrying my hoses around to the different spigots that I have on the house. Whereas if I had those heavy hoses that supposedly don't kink, but I have never had never had a heavy rubber hose that didn't kink, even though it said it wasn't. But you can use like a watering wand with the small hoses and just so much easier to handle. Mulching is always good. Just a couple of things to remember about mulching. You don't want to, if you put down mulch, it tends to tidy up your beds and things like that. You don't want to put the mulch down too early before the ground has actually warmed up. And you don't want to allow the mulch to come in contact with the crown of the perennials or shrubs or small trees. About 2 inches of mulch is good at suppressing weeds. Obviously, you have to worry about getting the mulch down, but maybe you have somebody that can help you with that. A couple other things that I've started doing much more this year that seems to have worked quite well is staking things early in the spring. I have a lot of the coneflowers, and because of I have a fair amount of shade, my coneflowers tend to get leggy and flop over. And I know I used to always, at the end of the summer, try to tie them up, and but it never looked very good. And it really helped. I make small rings of short wires, fencing wires, depending upon how large the clump is, and put those out in the spring, and then the plants grow around you. If you use the green fencing, you can't see them, and they'll be covered up pretty much with the foliage and such. So I've found that staking really, really has helped a lot. Amy, I don't know if you want to ask her questions or how you want to handle it.
Does anybody have any other questions? You can either shout them out right now or you can type them in that chat. I don't see any questions. Anybody have anything they want to ask?
Yeah, well, let me just mention the Master Gardeners does have a helpline where you can actually call the number and leave a message. On Tuesdays mornings, there is actually somebody there to answer the helpline. The phone number that you can use is 440-350-2254. I'll repeat that, 440-350-2254. If you leave a voicemail, somebody will get back to you. We do have an email that you can also send questions to, and that is mgv Lake County, spelled out, at gmail.com. Again, it's mgv Lake County at gmail.com. And we can do things, you know, I caution you when you are searching the web, be wary of what the website is. We recommend that you try to use research-based information, which can be found at the, you know, like Ohio State is our land grant college for Ohio, so they have good information. Every state has somebody. There, you know, Purdue is good. Penn State is good. Michigan State is good. There's a lot of different universities where you can get a lot of good information. So, you know, just recommend that you be leery a little bit of some of the things you see, because a lot of times somebody's trying to sell you something to supposedly fix all your problems.